On today's show, the Houston Rockets get embarrassed again by the Oklahoma City Thunder, nearly a 40-point blowout loss. These are the types of games that get head coaches fired in the NBA. And the Rockets have had a lot of these types of games, so why haven't we seen any changes made? We're going to tackle that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian, a credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin. The show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts. As always, we sincerely appreciate you for making LOR part of your day every single day, whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thanks for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. The Rockets, it seems like it took forever. The Rockets have made it to All-Star break officially. The Rockets are 2/3 of the way done with their season. They've got 24 games left. But man, has it been a grind to get here. I feel exhausted. Do you feel exhausted? I feel exhausted. I can only imagine how the actual team and players and coaches feel actually going through it. I just talk about it, right? I just watch the games. You're just watching the games. We talk about it. We chat on Twitter about the games, but this season has been a slog. It has been exhausting. There's 1/3 left though. 24 games left. And the Rockets have some really big questions facing this organization over these final 24 games. They just got blown out yet again, an embarrassing loss against the Oklahoma City Thunder, 133-96. Jalen got hurt. Jae'Sean Tate got hurt. The Rockets looked a complete mess. You can make an argument that Frank Kaminsky looked like their best facilitator on the floor, which is kind of crazy to think about. He had 5 assists in this game. I don't so much want to talk about the actual game itself other than, just the Rockets, they just look bad, man. They had nearly 40 points hung on them in the first quarter, 38-21 start of this game. And then OKC dropped another 38 in the second quarter. It was an embarrassing game. It was really rough top to bottom. I really don't want to talk about much of the game, actually, but I do want to focus on the fact that these are the types of games that get head coaches fired, right? Especially when they happen repeatedly, right? This is not like, oh, the Rockets, okay, they had a bad night. All right, well, we'll come back and get them next time, right? This is, oh, the Rockets are the laughingstock of the NBA right now. They don't look like an NBA team. They don't resemble an NBA team. And some of that is because of the youth of the players. Absolutely. But a lot of it has to come down to the fact that the coaches are not putting these guys in the best positions to succeed. I'm sorry. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Stephen Silas willingly came out and told Mark Stein in an article, in an interview, that he doesn't run any plays for Jabari Smith Jr. What? That is one of the most outlandish things that I've ever heard, right? That you don't run any plays for the number 3 overall pick in the draft. And he said this willingly. I made the argument on our last episode that Jabari's not exactly in a position right now, given how poorly he's been playing this season, to have plays drawn up for him. But the thing that you need from your coaches, right, from your head coach, you need a coaching staff that can empower and give confidence to players, right? You need a coaching staff that can lift players up, right? And this Rockets coaching staff has not done that at all for Jabari Smith Jr. I feel like this Rockets coaching staff has utterly failed Jabari as a player. Jabari has to be able to hit open shots. Absolutely. But where was any evidence of the Rockets actually building plays or making him, featuring him in the offense or just making him feel involved, right? Nobody's asking for Jabari to be the number one option on this Rockets team, but for the entire chunk of the first half of this season, Jabari was an afterthought offensively. He would get his shots whenever he got an open three on offense, and that was basically it. And then he'd have the occasional good game where he was actually hot, where he was, doing really well, or he sunk a couple shots, and then his teammates wouldn't find him, right? He'd get iced out for the rest of the game. That's coaching. That's Stephen Silas' fault. This 40-point blowout loss, the lack of preparation, the lack of any sense of cohesion of this team looking like an NBA team, that is Stephen Silas' fault. The fact that this Rockets team still doesn't understand how to deal with a zone defense when they're presented with zone defenses, they look utterly lost out there on the floor. That is the best way to put it, is this team looks utterly lost out there on the floor. And it's even funnier happening against another young team like the Oklahoma City Thunder that's trotting out lineups with players just as young as the Rockets are. And the one argument that I keep hearing about OKC is, oh, well, they have SGA. Yeah, SGA helps quite a bit. The Thunder still look like a competent team even when SGA is not on the floor. And that speaks volumes about where OKC is at as far as how they handle their development, how their coaching has handled their young players and all of that. You can't make the argument that OKC has, it just doesn't work. The Rockets at this point are an embarrassment. They are. And I hate having to tear into them this way. It sucks, but they are. And it's really disappointing. And watching, I feel for the fans who sit here and watch every game, the diehards who will turn the game on and will watch all the way until the final buzzer every game, no matter what. Because first off, I'm going through it too with you. I'm watching these games and I'm like, this is brutal. This is so painful to watch. But it's a disservice to the fans. And at this point, the Rockets really have to ask themselves the question of, is it worthwhile making a change? Is there enough to be gained in the short term over these final 24 games to move on from Stephen Silas and give somebody else a chance with these young guys, John Lucas, Mahmoud Abdel-Fattah, like either one of those guys, right? Like lean into one of them. Lionel Hollins, I don't know, somebody else on the Rockets bench, right? Rick Higgins, just promote an assistant. I would stick with Lucas or Abdel-Fattah, but promote one of those guys in the hopes that you can salvage some of this season, right? Because it feels like this season has been a miss as far as development is concerned. It feels like a wasted season of development. It really does. So the Rockets have to ask themselves, is it worthwhile making a change over the All-Star break and having a fresh set of eyes, having a fresh voice, a new voice, a different voice, commanding that Rockets locker room for the final 1/3 of the season, for the final 24 games? And would that make a difference going into this offseason? Coming up, I want to explore that possibility, talk about some of the pros and cons there as far as potentially moving on from Silas and why the organization hasn't done it yet. We'll talk about that in just one moment, but first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We've officially made it to the NBA All-Star break, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers, three-pointers drained, dunks, Sixth Man of the Year, MVP, NBA title odds, all of those. Right now, you can head over to FanDuel to take a look at the odds for this year's NBA championship. And right now, the Boston Celtics leading the way at +270, the Milwaukee Bucks at +410, the Phoenix Suns +500, and then rounding out the top five, the Denver Nuggets at +750, and the LA Clippers, Eric Gordon's new home, at +1200. So for all those odds, be sure to go check out FanDuel. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlays. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, let's go ahead and we'll keep navigating this discussion around the Rockets because look, the Rockets have to figure out whether these next 24 games matter or not. That's a big question. Look, in the grand scheme of things, right? You've had teams that have played poorly, have gone through tanking and rebuilding and all that, and you've had young players, right? And you can point to and look at a number of different really talented players, right? You look, a couple right off the top of my head, right? Joel Embiid, Devin Booker. Those are guys who lived through the process era Sixers and the Phoenix Suns when they were just god-awful, right? Terrible teams. And those are some of the best players in the NBA now. So does all this losing really matter in the grand scheme of things, or does it only matter and does it only feel like it matters right now while we're in it, right? While we're experiencing it, right? If 5 years from now the Rockets are competing for playoffs again and they look good and Jalen Green looks like a superstar and all this, will we look back on the losing and be like, yeah, well, Jalen might be even better if they hadn't gone? I don't know, right? We don't know. That's the issue, is we don't know how this losing impacts this group of guys. What we do know is that in the moment, in the here and now, it does not feel good. It feels awful. And it's got to feel awful for the players. It feels awful for the fans. It's a terrible product on the court. And I think there is some merit to the argument that bad habits can start to be developed, and you can have guys who are not growing as quickly as they probably should or could because of the situation that they find themselves in right now, right? Like, you have, again, a head coach who doesn't believe in designing plays for the number 3 overall pick in the draft. However, the same head coach was designing plays for Garrison Matthews. Like, what? Garrison Matthews would come running off screens multiple times a game. And those were play calls. Those were play calls by Stephen Silas to get Garrison Matthews 3-point shots, because that's all he could do on the floor, was come off a screen and shoot the ball. And we haven't ever seen that for Jabari, at least not consistently. There might have been a one-off play call where Jabari comes off a screen, but we don't see regular play calls for Jabari. And credit to good friend of the show, Nathan Fogg. Be on the lookout for our next episode. We've got some draft content coming out for you guys, talking about Brandon Miller out of Alabama. Even Nathan Fogg pointed out the fact that, look, you don't have to be a number 1 or a number 2 or a number 3 option to have plays drawn up for you. He highlighted the fact that Mike D'Antoni had plays drawn up for guys like Ben McLemore and Gerald Green, right? You could draw up plays for anybody on the floor. And the Rockets still elect not to do that for Jabari Smith Jr. Makes no sense. Like, again, Jabari has been bad. I'm not sitting here defending Jabari. I'm just pointing out that there's inconsistency with the coaching staff, right? There's inconsistency in the way that they try to hold guys accountable, right? There was the whole, last week, Stephen Silas pulled Alperen Sengun out of the game and yelled at him and was hounding him up and down the sideline, and then subbed him back in because he blew a defensive, he messed up on defense or was in the wrong spot or whatever. When have we ever seen that same energy applied towards Jalen Green or Kevin Porter Jr. or Jabari or Tari or Eric Gordon, anybody on the Rockets roster who has blown defensive coverages before? Because this team blows a lot of defensive coverages, and yet the one and only time we saw it be like a visible frustration thing where there was some active coaching happening on the sideline was with Alperen Sengun. Like, there's a double standard there. I don't know. I could sit here and wax poetic about all the issues with the coaching for this Houston Rockets team. Hell, earlier this season, when I prompted Silas to talk about ways that he could get Jabari more involved, one, we were told early this season, very early on this season, I think 6 games in, we were told that Jabari can't get pick and pop opportunities if the defense is switching. Like what? Like that was the answer. Is if the defense is switching, sorry, Jabari's neutralized. We can't get him the ball at all. Sorry. If the defense switches, there's no way to get him the ball. Like that was, I'm paraphrasing here, but that was basically the answer. And then further down the line, when I got the chance to ask Stephen about possibly using Jabari in motion, he says, I don't think Jabari is ready for that, or I don't want to use Jabari in motion, something along those lines. Again, I'm paraphrasing here, but these are legitimate like comments and answers that we have received when asked about how certain players are performing or how to utilize certain players. I think there's a disconnect here, man. I really do. I don't want to sit here and pretend that I know more basketball than Stephen Silas. I absolutely do not. Stephen Silas has forgotten more about basketball than I will ever hope to know in my entire life. But as far as the practical applications of these things and the decision-making and the understanding of pushing the right buttons and getting the most out of these guys, I don't see it. I don't see it translating. I don't see it happening on a night-to-night basis on the court. You see concerning trends. You see moments where he doesn't even acknowledge what some of his own players' strengths are. All of this is like, it's either one gigantic big red flag or like a million little red flags, whatever way you want to describe it. And I think there is something to be said for the idea of if the Rockets were to move on from him, I think we would see a renewed focus, a renewed energy in that locker room. Guys who clearly respond to a different type of leader, right? This team has responded routinely to John Lucas when he is the head coach, right? And it's not, again, I see people say this all the time when asking about, well, if John Lucas is on the bench, what does it matter if he's the head coach? Look, if you are the assistant manager and your boss is the one calling all the shots, you don't get the same pull. You don't get to handle things the exact same way that you would handle it if you were in those shoes, right? So no, John Lucas isn't going to be able to chew a guy. John Lucas can't go and bench KJ Martin as an assistant coach. He can't walk up to Steve and say, hey, I'm pulling KJ because he blew that rotation. Like, that's not the same level of say-so or authority that you have when you're an assistant coach, right? The way that John Lucas handled KJ Martin in that Pistons game, the way that he was yelling at guys and calling out Tari and getting the guys to fight hard, and he was running up and down the sidelines, all that, you don't get to do that as an assistant, right? That's up to the head coach, right? The head coach is the final voice. He is the guy who says what goes, all of that, and the other guys have to follow his lead. So when that guy is Stephen Silas and he's soft-spoken, reserved, introverted, whatever you want to call it, happy-go-lucky, whatever you want to say about him, the guys aren't responding to this, right? But they do respond to Coach Lucas. And I feel like they would also respond to Abdel Fattah because both of those guys are total hard asses. They will chew you out and they will break you down and then build you back up and get the best version out of you. And I think that over these final 24 games of the season, that would be the best way to end this season on a high note, is to give these guys a different voice, give them a different look, inspire them, give them the confidence that they need to perform over these last 24 games. And then we can go into the offseason and feel pretty good about this situation. Obviously, there are a lot of big things that need to be handled in the offseason. A new coach, the draft, the cap space, a lot of moves that the front office has to make. But something that could give Rockets fans a sense of confidence in the organization moving forward is if you end this season with some positivity on the court, not these embarrassing 40-point blowouts where everything looks like a dumpster fire, right? I'm not saying that Lucas or Abdel Fattah would immediately fix that overnight. Hell, even if Lucas was coaching this game, it might have still been a 40-point blowout. But at this point, the players deserve somebody that they can resonate with or that can get more out of them, because it just feels like the message from Stephen Silas at this point is falling on deaf ears. It feels like he's lost the locker room, and it feels like he doesn't know what he's doing. Feels like he's in over his head. Maybe things would have been different if he had a James Harden and a Russell Westbrook to coach. But you know what? Even with that argument, that's a further indictment of him, because a coach should be able to coach whatever group is in front of him, right? You should be able to mold your coaching philosophy, your beliefs, the way you approach the game to the group that you have at hand. not trying to bend the group to match your preferred vision of how the game is supposed to be played or how you want to approach the game as a coach. So I'm going to get off my soapbox here talking about Stephen Silas. I wanted to get some of that off my chest. It's a little cathartic. I feel better about that. But coming up, I do want to talk a little bit about All-Star Weekend. There are, expectations for that. What happens now if Jalen Green is hurt? I make a couple predictions about All-Star Weekend, all that good stuff, and a couple other things coming up here in the final segment in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, I do want to take a quick glance at NBA All-Star Weekend, expectations, predictions, whatever. However, I do want to chime in one more note here on the Silas discussion, because that's basically what this episode's been dominated by. I mentioned in the top of the episode, why have the Rockets not moved on from Silas at this point? And I think that there are a bunch of factors at play here, but being completely honest is the passing of his father definitely impacted what was likely to be the ability of the organization to do anything with him as far as his job security goes. And that's just it. I don't know if it feels crass to say that, but that's probably just a fact, right? Like, his father passed when the Rockets were in the midst of the losing in December, and then they had the memorial service, the wake, whatever it was, for his father a little bit later on when the Rockets were still really struggling and having some bad losses. And it's been spaced out enough to where now it kind of feels like, and again, I said this before, that if it didn't happen at the peak of the losing streak, the Charlotte loss, which was still arguably the worst loss in the season, losing to the Hornets without LaMelo Ball in the second half was just downright awful. If it didn't happen then, I kind of predicted that it wouldn't happen for the rest of the season and that he would finish the year as the Rockets head coach, for better or for worse. And that still kind of feels like the direction that it's going to go. However, again, I made my arguments there in segment 2, talking about, the benefits to potentially moving on from it. But it does kind of feel like, or at least the feeling that I'm getting, is that the organization just kind of wants to grit their teeth and bear it and just make it through this season, right? There's 24 games left. And like I said, we don't know, right? Like, if these 24 games are going, like, if Silas is still the coach for these final 24 games, is Jalen going to be ruined as a basketball player? Is he never going to be a superstar because he played these 24 games under suboptimal conditions with a bad coach? No, it's not going to ruin Jalen's future development. It's not going to ruin Alp's development. It's not going to ruin anybody's development. However, like I said, if you did get a different voice in there and you could get these guys playing some, with a renewed focus, a renewed sense of urgency, whatever, maybe some different schemes, a different approach. I'm not saying you overhaul everything over the All-Star break. It's not, but just get them playing a little bit harder, right? Give them some renewed confidence going into the final stretch of the season, to where maybe they start playing some better basketball just because there's a change of scenery, right? A different voice leading the locker room. And then that would not only provide some confidence for the fans and, some organizational confidence, but it would also provide confidence for the players, right? For them to, they could go into the offseason feeling good about themselves rather than just, oh my God, thank God the season's over. Oh my God, I don't have to deal with that anymore. Like, it's just, again, I'm exhausted just talking about it. I'm sure the players are exhausted living it and dealing with it every single day. So those are my final thoughts, my arguments on the coaching front. I will say, I'm excited for All-Star Weekend. I am doubtful now that Jalen Green will play, because it definitely looked like he had like a groin injury, a hamstring, whatever it was, in the middle of the game, left early against OKC. Hopefully he's okay. Haven't seen an update yet on him, but I highly doubt that he's going to participate in All-Star Weekend activities now. Maybe it's nothing. I mean, these 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, they're made of rubber, right? So maybe he bounces back and he's good to go, which is disappointing because he and Alp got drafted to the same Rising Stars team, so that would have been really cool to see them play on the court at the same time and play alongside each other. And I wanted Jalen to be able to kind of redeem himself after last year's issues in the dunk contest. And also, I wanted to be able to see him actually win the Rising Stars game this year as opposed to last year. So that was kind of, that's really, really disappointing. It takes some of the steam out of the excitement for All-Star Weekend. But Alperen will still be playing in the Rising Stars game. Jabari Smith Jr. will be playing in the Rising Stars game, so that'll be a ton of fun. And again, TBD on whether or not Jalen Green participates. And then Saturday night, the Rockets have two competitors, right? They've got Jabari Smith Jr. in the Skills Challenge, which seems like an absolute recipe for disaster. I don't know why Jabari is in the Skills Challenge. I feel like it's going to go pretty poorly, and I'm not trying to be mean about this, but it's not going to go well. Like it feels like a practical joke. It feels like a prank, honestly. Adding Jabari to the Skills Challenge is just mean. So we'll see. I would love for him to go out there and prove me wrong. I would love for him to go out there and ace every part of the Skills Challenge, drain the three-pointer at the end, and, fire off a tweet that says, "Screw you, Jackson." Like, that'd be fantastic. I'd be all for that. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. Do I think he's going to be the part of the team with him and Ivy and Banchero that's going to be holding up the team a little bit? Probably. So we'll see. I want to be wrong. I want to be wrong. I love it when I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm going to be wrong here. And then KJ Martin, who is the pinnacle of All-Star Weekend, with KJ Martin in the dunk contest, something that Rockets fans have been begging for years, and it finally happened. And I feel like KJ's the favorite. Like, I look up and down at the roster. You got Jericho Sims, you got Trey Murphy, and you've got Mac McClung. Like, those are his competitors in the dunk contest. First off, KJ is the most notable of all those players because he's got the name recognition of being Kenyon Martin's son, and he's also the most vicious dunker of that group. I think Mac McClung might be able to get some oohs and ahs just because he's such a small dunker. Right? Short, can leap out of the gym, whatever. But I feel like KJ has this in the bag. And I called it in a previous episode, but I just want to reiterate, I'm calling it right now, he's going to wear one of his dad's jerseys during the dunk contest as like a, paying tribute to his father or whatever, and it's going to be really cool when he does it. So all I'm praying is that KJ does not walk out on the floor with an NFT necklace on. For the love of God, please do not do that. And then on top of that, here's my question for you. If KJ needs a pass on any of his dunks, who is going to be the one throwing the pass to him? That's my question to you as the listener. I think it will be Alperen Sengun. KJ and Alpi are so incredibly close. They love each other. They're brothers. Like they get along. They are two of the closest guys on the entire team. I would imagine it would be Alpi throwing the pass to KJ, and that would be so cool to see Alperen Sengun be involved in throwing a bounce pass off the court or off the backboard or side of the backboard, whatever, to KJ Martin to complete some insanely complicated dunk. Would be awesome to see. My runner-up of note, though, would be Josh Christopher. So we'll see who actually winds up helping out KJ if he needs an assistant for any of his dunks. I think KJ's got the dunk contest in the bag. I don't think Jabari is going to do great during the skills competition, so I don't see that one working out well. And then TBD on whether or not Jalen actually plays in the Rising Stars game, but it'll still be very cool to see Alperen Sengun and Jabari Smith Jr. compete against all the other rookies and sophomores across the NBA. With that, that's going to do it for today's episode. Sorry that I got up on my soapbox there for a little bit. I wanted to get some of those frustrations off my chest. But as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.